Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Whitehold. They say he who has the gold makes the rules, but is that still true today? We're talking about the case for and against owning gold. I will tell today's prominent gold guest why I do not believe that gold is a good wealth creation vehicle at all. Why should gold have value today, and what's its future on Get Rich Education?
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE from Cape Cod, Massachusetts to Cape May, New Jersey, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Whitehold, and this is Get Rich Education. If aliens look down at what us humans do on Earth, they would wonder, what in the heck are we doing? We dig this shiny metal called gold out of the ground, refine it, melt it into bars and coins, just to go put it right back down in the ground again, in a vault. Today's show is going to explain why we do that with gold. Like real estate, gold is a physical, tangible asset. Why are major world banks, including China and Russia, loading up on gold like crazy these past several years? We'll get into that. Now, in the following weeks, we're going to center directly on real estate, including a show with one of the nation's foremost housing analysts about what's going on in the market now that interest rates have ticked up a little higher. Gold is on the periodic table of the elements, and you will be awarded some gold stars for comprehension if you recall from your sophomore high school chemistry class that it is element number 79. Its symbol is AU. It's beautiful, valuable, and it's one of the most malleable metals that there are. 1 ounce can be beaten out into 300 square feet. That's amazing. And gold does not rust. It is scarce, too. It's been said that all the gold that's ever been mined would fit into a cube with edges 22 meters long. That's small enough to fit into 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Well, these are some reasons that it's been regarded as money for millennia, and it's often still held as reserves by international banks, regarded for stability. Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary says, I like gold because it is a stabilizer, it's an insurance policy. Now, there are all these parables about gold that still exist into the modern day that you say in today's vernacular. People think about King Midas and reference him. When it comes to trustworthy people today, you might still say that, oh, well, your word is as good as gold. They still award gold medals at the Olympics. That's what they call them, though in reality, they're mostly silver and just gold-plated there at the Olympics. You have all these influential icons that have made profound quotes about gold. Herbert Hoover, our president during the Great Depression, said, we have gold because we cannot trust governments. J.P. Morgan said, gold is money and everything else is credit. And here in more modern times, Ron Paul said, because gold is honest money, it is disliked by honest men. Well, if gold is valuable and important, wouldn't many want to own it? Like a lot of people would want to have some? How many Americans do you think own gold? Any idea? A recent survey by Gold IRA Guide found that 11% of Americans own gold. That's it, so about 1 in 9. Any time that a nation has gold in their currency itself, they usually slowly dilute it and eventually take it out of circulation, and then they replace it with an IOU for gold, and then soon you can't even exchange your IOU for gold, which is what a dollar is. What I'm talking about here is Gresham's Law. Gresham's Law means bad money chases out good. Because printing money out of thin air is not a novel concept. In the times of the Roman Empire, creating money out of thin air was accomplished by replacing the gold or silver in coins with lead or with other cheaper base metals. But once currencies get so badly inflated like this, people want to get back to gold. Now, a friend of mine, she recently vacationed in Egypt, and she was telling me about her tour guide And as soon as she paid her tour guide at the end of the tour, that Egyptian tour guide rushed to exchange her Egyptian currency for gold. And like a lot of nations, Egyptian inflation has been rampant lately. As of just last month, it was 36% annually. And in my lifetime, and in your lifetime, we haven't had inflation that badly in the United States. But, globally, it is just undeniable that long-term people keep flocking to gold. Let's discuss why and why central banks are now hoarding it with today's guest. Today, we're talking to a nationally respected source for physical precious metals. It's his 43rd year in the business. He has worked with the late Jim Blanchard. That alone almost makes people's jaw drop because Jim Blanchard, he died nearly 25 years ago, and he spearheaded the nationwide movement to legalize gold ownership in the United States again. This week's guest founded American Gold Exchange in 1998, and he's been running it ever since. He sits on the board of directors of some really prestigious leading industry organizations. And on a more personal note, this week's guest is known for being transparent and trusted. We have a lot of mutual friends. And I got to tell you, it's just uncanny how many people I've run into that say they only prefer to buy gold for themselves through this man. Hey, so it's so good to have you. Welcome to GRE, Dana Samuelson.
Hi, Keith. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. That's very kind of you.
Dana, you and we both often attend investing conferences. And I got to tell you, something that happens at investing conferences, whenever there's a session on gold, it often interests me. So I watch and might even ask a question. And you know what? When that session about gold is done at a conference, I swear this always happens. It seems like there's some younger person in the audience where I can just see where they made a connection inside their brain that they have never made before in their lives. And that connection is, oh, well, maybe I should own some gold. Like it never even occurred to them before.
Right. Well, we don't have a precious metals heritage in our modern country like most other countries have had. And that's primarily because gold was outlawed for private ownership between 1933 and 1974, when my mentor, Jim Blanchard, got it re-legalized. He was a leading proponent of that movement. But also, we've never had our currency fail. So if you've been in Asia or Europe, after World War I, Germany's currency failed. We've had currency failures in Asia. And countries that have had their paper money go bad understand why it's vital to have some precious metals on the side as a way to hedge against your potential financial uncertainty.
Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela, on and on, yeah.
Right. I mean, Argentina's just had a 20% devaluation of the peso in the last 2 weeks because their currency's failing.
What's funny is I still think that there are some novices that still don't make the connection in how that helps make the case for gold. So oftentimes, Dana, I like to look at things through the lens of pros and cons. So why don't we talk about, in today's modern society, really the case for owning gold and the case against owning gold?
Well, the case for owning gold is pretty simple. Gold is one of the only assets in the entire world that has no counterparty risk. Almost every other financial investment has counterparty risk, meaning your financial success is contingent upon a party that you're trading with performing, whether it's a mortgage, you have a renter paying the mortgage, or you're buying a stock, it's the company making profits, or if you're buying a bond, it's the interest being paid on the bond and the issuer not failing. That's all counterparty risk. Gold is the oldest, most trusted form of money in the world, going back to 2500 BC. King Tutankhamun's burial mask, was made of 25 pounds of pure gold, and that goes all the way till the 30s. Gold was money and currency. They're two different things. Money is something that has value. Currency is something we use as a medium of exchange. We took the gold out of the currency in the 30s worldwide. Silver remained in the currency until the 60s and 70s. Now all we have is paper money. And what has that allowed the world's politicians to do? to explode the debt. So between the founding of our country in 1995, the U.S. accumulated $5 trillion in debt. Now it's 28 years later, and our debt is now $32 trillion. It's grown 6 times, sixfold in 28 years. Now, that could have never happened when the amount of money that was out there was gold and silver coins, because you just can't make it at will, like you can print dollars. And this is why it's important for people today, especially in an inflationary environment where the purchasing power of your currency drops relative to the things you need to buy. That's what gold and silver are really good for, as a hedge against inflation and financial uncertainty. Gold is basically an insurance policy for the rest of your finances. If you have 5 to 10% of your assets in gold, you have a counterbalance against financial uncertainty. And it worked perfectly during the great financial crisis of 2008. The gold price went from about $700, $800 an ounce all the way to $1,900 an ounce when everything else was plummeting in value. And today, gold is back to around $1,900 an ounce, and it's holding up and tracking our debt quite well. Now, on the con side, well, let me just finish a bit more about pros. It's very compact also. 100 ounces of gold is worth about $190,000 today. It's the size of a paperback novel. You can put it in your pocket and carry it around, and no one will know that you have it. It's portable, transferable wealth that has no counterparty risk. Now, the con, in my view, is there's no dividends. That you can't make money on it as an investment like you can with a mortgage, with a real property that you can have a renter who will help pay your note down. Right? It doesn't pay a dividend. It doesn't pay a yield. It's just a lump of metal, but it's the most precious lump of metal on the planet for most people who understand value. Plus, it gives you immediate liquidity, which other investments like real estate, sometimes they're hard to sell if you can't get a good loan terms or mortgages from the buyers. So gold gives you a host of things that most other assets don't, but it's just a lump of metal, but it's a really good lump of metal to have.
Yeah, totally. Because few things have had as much enduring value as gold, durable value for about 5,000 years. You help distinguish how really it's money and the dollar is currency. I think on the plus side in the case for gold is it's really hard for it to go to zero when it has that much monetary history behind it. It's funny, Dana. Well, I think you saw this video a few months ago. I had a video shot of me unboxing gold, a shipment of gold that I bought. One of the YouTube comments was kind of funny. It was like, oh, well, this is why you don't have any money. I think they were just joking, but it's like, oh, because you're spending your money on gold. I don't know if everyone understands really gold is about the best money that I can think of. So therefore, when one buys gold, they should perhaps think about it as what they're doing is they're shifting some of their prosperity from dollars over into gold. That's why I like to think about it that way. And we talk more about the case against gold. Yeah, you talk about how here we're cash flow centric investors. We also like to use leverage. Maybe there's some creative ways to do it, but you probably agree that the availability of leverage with gold just isn't as great as it is with real estate. And then when we think about intrinsic value, which is kind of a funny word. I don't really know if anything has intrinsic value. Does gold have very many industrial uses today?
Yes, it's used in some industrial applications, but it's more as a store of wealth. And there's some attrition in gold, not near as much as would make it an impact on what has been mined, because almost all of the gold that's been mined in man's history still survives today. But the fact is we've probably reached peak gold already. So the amount of continuing supply is going to slowly diminish. We've seen central banks, who are the most conservative investors in the world, go into a gold accumulation phase starting after the great financial crisis in 2010. And they've continued to do that for the last 12 years. Now, central bankers are the most conservative bankers in the world. Central bankers were net sellers of gold between 1983 and 2010, and they switched to become net buyers of gold over the last 12 years. They've watched the debt explosion. Other countries, just turning the printing presses on. So their currencies would go down in value. So their exports would be more competitive. It's a game of fools, basically, because it's going to create more pressure on the currencies. And they've gone to buying gold as a way to hedge against counterparty risk, but not with a mortgagee or a bank or a stock, with other countries in their bonds. It's on the most largest conservative level you will ever see. So that's helping to support demand right now. And that'll mitigate some of the fact that the gold doesn't have industrial uses like some of the other precious metals like silver, platinum, and palladium. But let's stay with gold.
I want to talk to you in a moment about why central banks have been hoarding gold. You mentioned that trend really picked up in 2010. But first, you touched on something important, and really that's inflation. In a lot of senses, gold doesn't really go up in value. It just takes more and more dollars to buy gold as the dollar gets debased in value. But I'm actually talking about something different here. I'm talking about supply inflation in the amount of gold available. For example, if the amount of gold doubled tomorrow, that would concern some holders of gold. Maybe they'd be like, could the price then fall in half if the supply of gold doubled tomorrow? But from what I've read, Dana, and it sounds like from talking to you that this rate is decreasing, but I've read and heard that it is difficult to exceed a supply inflation rate of more than 2% per year of gold. Therefore, just using simple numbers, if you mined 100 tons of worldwide gold in one year, it would be difficult to pull out more than 102 the next year. Is that about where we're at with supply inflation, 2% or less?
Yes, it's minimal. Gold mining is a big, dirty, nasty business. It takes a lot of energy. It's not environmentally correct. You can't really mine gold in the United States because of laws for the environment effectively. It's hard. It takes about 2 tons of dirt to get 1 ounce of gold out of the ground. And that's a lot of time and effort. So it's hard to find more of, which is why it's valuable.
Yeah.
And another reason I can just go on to central banks, it was made a tier 1 asset by the Bank of International Settlements a couple of years ago, which means banks can hold gold on their balance sheet as a zero risk investment. And that has helped create the appetite for banks to hold gold that they didn't have prior to this when it was a tier 3 asset. So it's one of the few tier 1 assets like treasury bonds that you can hold. So that's enabled gold to have some more allure among the most conservative buyers there are. Also, we've got this whole de-dollarization movement. I don't know if your people are familiar with that, but there's a move to have countries that are potentially sanctionable by the U.S., like Russia has been sanctioned due to the war in the Ukraine. Well, they don't want to be contingent upon the U.S. petrodollar system worldwide, or the dollar system worldwide, in case they become sanctioned. So there's a movement to trade less dollars, and there may be a possible in the future a BRICS currency that's partially backed by gold. If that happens, the demand for gold will go up quite a lot. Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon, but that whole phase is something that is ongoing right now.
Yeah, well, you opened up a lot of things there. Yeah, the central banks of some of the biggest nations in the world, including Russia and China, have really been the ones loading up on gold. You mentioned the BRICS nations. That's an acronym that stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But there are other nations in addition to those that fit in the BRICS acronym. And of course, Dana, this might be oversimplifying things a bit, but it might help people understand the role of gold a bit more. Tell me how much of an oversimplification this is. If I'm the United States, why don't I just print US dollars and have my central bank go exchange it for gold, or have Russia do that with the ruble, or China with their yuan, or Brazil with their reals? Just print the currency and then go exchange it for gold, and now your central bank's got more gold.
Well, to a degree, that has been happening. That's why central banks have been buying more gold, because they can do that to a degree.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. We've never seen our debt explode like we have since the great financial crisis. I mean, this is a game changer. And that's partially why we have this inflationary bout that we're going through right now, where inflation hasn't been 1 or 2% for the last 6 or 8, 9 years. Now it's got up to 9%. It's about 4 or 5% now, no matter how you measure it, but it could be stickier. So it's in a time like this, which is just a measure of the dollar and other paper currencies losing their purchasing power. We're all getting a financial haircut. Now, the good news is real estate is one of the best places you can be in an inflationary environment because the value of land and the value of the improvements on the land goes up with the inflation rate. Well, that's what gold tends to do as well. But gold has benefits that land doesn't, and vice versa. Cash flow versus stability, portability versus, no portability, liquidity versus sometimes there isn't liquidity. It's a good way to enhance your real estate holdings. And as you touched on earlier, it's a way to save your hard-earned gains in a quote-unquote currency that can't be diluted by more printing. So people should think of gold as a savings vehicle, not necessarily as an investment vehicle. It's a good way to hold your hard-earned profits. And I know that you've had Robert Kiyosaki on your program before, and that's what Robert does. He takes his gains from his real estate and puts it into gold. There are years where it doesn't seem to serve him so well, and then there are years when it's been very good to have it. And over time, it's a much better way to hold savings as opposed to holding dollars as savings.
I really appreciate that perspective because it might sound a little bit coarse, but I tell people, hey, don't ever expect to get rich from stacking gold bars. It's not a wealth generator, but for wealth storage, it's difficult for me to think of anything better. So you might generate your wealth in real estate or in an active business. And with gold, we're talking about a stable, durable place to store it over the long term.
Right. Savings for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. We're talking with Dana Samuelson. He is indeed the founder and owner of American Gold Exchange. Hey, he's also an exhibitor at a terrific conference that I've attended a few times in the past. That is November's New Orleans Investment Conference. So you might say hi to Dana. Not only is he an exhibitor there, but he's also on the precious metals panel.
Right. Brian London, who is the proprietor of the New Orleans Investment Conference, which is a hard money related conference. It's in New Orleans every year. He and I both worked for Jim Blanchard in the 80s. That's where Brian and I met. And when Jim passed away, Brian took the conference over. And he's done a remarkable job attracting on an annual basis some of the leading economic minds in the world. I mean, I've gotten cutting edge information every year at Brian's conference about what's coming in the economy and what to expect. I mean, the first person to ever talk about inflation was a guy named Grant Williams, who talked at the end of the 2020 conference before inflation reared its ugly head in 2021. He saw it coming and he helped put it on the roadmap for me. So you never know what you're going to learn at the New Orleans Investment Conference, but for a 3 or 4 day event, it is a great, great conference.
Dana Samuelson and I are talking about gold. More when we come back, including if gold is so often back-ordered, then why isn't the price higher? That, in addition to more, when we come back on gold. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. GRE listeners can't stop talking about their service from Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They've provided our tribe with more loans than anyone. They're truly a top lender for beginners and veterans. It's where I go to get my own loans for single-family rental property up to 4 plexes. So start your pre-qualification and you can chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even deliver your custom plan for growing your real estate portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. I'll just tell you, for the most passive part of my real estate investing, personally, I put my own dollars with Freedom Family Investments because their funds pay me a stream of regular cash flow and returns are better than a bank savings account, up to 12%. Their minimums are as low as $25K. You don't even need to be accredited for some of them. It's all backed by real estate, and I kind of love how the tax benefit of doing this can offset capital gains and your W-2 job's income. And they've always given me exactly their stated return, paid on time. So it's steady income, no surprises while I'm sleeping or just doing the things I love. For a little insider tip, I've invested in their Power Fund. To get going on that, text family to 66866. Oh, and this isn't a solicitation. If you want to invest where I do, just go ahead and text family to 66866.
This is Peak Prosperity's Chris Martinson. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with one of the most prestigious and influential men in the gold industry. His name's Dana Samuelson. He is indeed the founder and owner of the American Gold Exchange. So we're talking about gold today. And now we go back to making the case for gold, Dana. And I think people trying to wrap their head around it. Sometimes a question that I have for people is, well, it's always good to have some liquidity, some reserves. But now, are you really going to hold 100% of your liquid purchasing power in United States dollars? 100%? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I don't think that's a good idea, except for when there are times of real opportunity when having cash available makes sense. And inflation's 5%. That means their dollars are going to lose 5% of their purchasing power over the next year or so while you hold that cash. I still think gold is a great way for savings. Physical gold has some friction on the transaction because of the manufacturing, the distribution, and the profits. So it's not a trading vehicle. It's more of a savings vehicle for most people. So you don't want to buy some to sell it in 3 months because you might need some cash for a real estate investment. But it's always good to have some dry powder. But I wouldn't have 100% of my money in dollars ever, not in the way the politicians are just printing more and more of these dollars every year and diluting the value of them.
Well, that's such a good point. I'm glad you bring this up because oftentimes when we think about gold, we think about liquidity. And it does have a high amount of liquidity and that it's pretty easy to find an available buyer for your gold. But yet maybe it's not so liquid in the fact that, well, we might have to put it in a package or put it in a box. And then you touched on the other reason why you don't want to come in and out of gold too quickly because you have these spot price differentials that you have to overcome. So you quoted some prices earlier, Dana, talking about the history of gold's pricing and that it recently touched $2,000 a few times. It's since come back off that. But just say the spot price is $2,000. Tell us about those spot price differentials, the price you pay when you buy over $2,000 and the price that you have to sell back for, which is often then less than the $2,000 spot price.
We deal in physical modern minted bullion coins and bars. So bars are made by private refineries, and we deal with a couple of refineries out of Switzerland who make perfectly good products. We also deal in sovereign minted 1 ounce gold coins. They're just round bars struck by a government instead of a private entity. The U.S. gold eagles, U.S. gold buffaloes made by the U.S. Mint, Canadian gold, Austrian gold, different coins. Now, to make these, the specifications for that ounce or that 10 ounce unit are exacting. Perfect weight, perfect purity, or if it's not pure, and some are not 100% pure, they have a little alloy added because pure gold is very soft. And if you don't add a little bit of other to it, a little copper or silver to it, sometimes a little nickel, it hardens it up quite a bit. It's called the durable gold standard. Most coins that were made to be used as currency in gold are not pure because they'd wear out way too fast. That's why jewelry isn't pure gold. It's soft and it's pliable, bendable. So anyway, there's a manufacturing cost. So if gold is $2,000 an ounce, the mints or the refineries don't make that fabricated 1 ounce bar or coin for free. They usually charge a vendor like me who buys in volume 2 to 3 to 4% over the price of gold to manufacture it and ship it to me. Then I in turn make 1 or 2% on top of that. Our margins are tiny. So a 1 ounce gold coin or bar could cost you $20.60 or $20.80 per ounce when the gold price is $2,000 an ounce. Now, when you go to sell that, you're going to get the $2,000 price, assuming the gold price hasn't moved in the meantime, or a small premium, 1.5%. So you get 20.20 or 20.30 back. So that difference is the buy-sell spread. And it could be $40, $60, $70 an ounce. That's the friction that I mentioned on the buy and the sell. And that's just the nature of the beast. in the physical gold market. Now, there's other ways to invest in gold. You can buy an ETF, exchange traded fund, but that's just trading the price movement of gold on paper. It's not a way to hold physical gold. They're two different things entirely. So if you want to trade the price movement of gold, you can do that with an exchange traded fund, but that's not the same as holding physical gold that you control. That's no counterparty risk, private transferable wealth. I could literally hand you a box that has $200,000 in it, and it's a private transaction. You can't do that with an ETF.
Yeah, well, in the example you gave there, it might be a spot price differential of 4% or more that you would need to overcome as a buyer. So in theory, if you bought a bar of gold and turned around and tried to sell it immediately, you might get 4% less or even a greater disparity than that. So you need to think that through when it comes to liquidity. You probably want to hold your gold for a little while. Dana, I've bought gold from various suppliers over the years. And one thing that I've often noticed, and it doesn't seem to matter how the economy is, oftentimes I see gold sellers, they're either sold out or the item is on back order. And a lot of times I think, now, is that a demand signal that they can't meet the demand with enough supply? And if that's true, shouldn't the price be going up? What are your thoughts there with gold so often being back ordered on some of these sites?
What happens is we go through feast and famine markets where everything's fine economically, nothing's wrong, supplies are good, premiums are low and competitive. And then we could have an event like COVID or the great financial crisis or a bank failure like SVB bank failing. Suddenly there's a huge rush of demand for product. People want to have it in their hands right now. Well, the shelves can get of available supply nationwide. We've trained a lot of people to buy gold who never bought gold before following the great financial crisis, right? It was a 2 or 3 year period. When we had that COVID wave hit in March of 2020, all those people that had learned to buy over a 2 or 3 year period did it in 2 or 3 days in March of 2020. They wiped the shelves clean. Yeah. So now dealers like me are all scrambling for what the mints can replace product with. And their capacity is limited to the machinery they have, the amount of blanks they can get. So even though there's a squeeze on what's available for immediate delivery, and the premiums can be higher because there's more people competing for that ounce than there are available ounces to be bought, that doesn't mean the underlying price of gold is going to go up dramatically just because there's a short-term squeeze on the available physical supply, which is a fraction of the amount of ounces of gold that are really out there in bar form, in deep storage, or in private hands for a long, long time. So we go through these waves of feast and famine sometimes where there can be delays, higher premiums, and they can last for a while, but it's primarily at the manufacturing bottleneck, and it's usually the blanks that the coins are struck on. To ramp that capacity of making those blanks up quickly, it doesn't happen. It's like suddenly there's a run on a medicine. Well, that doesn't mean the manufacturer of a pill can make a ton more pills all of a sudden because they don't have the equipment, the machinery. To invest in minting machinery is expensive, and it's a big commitment. So that's really where the rub is. And we've gone through a couple periods over the last 15 years where we've had extremes. In fact, right now we're in the most competitive pricing market we've seen since COVID hit because things are quieter in the summer and fall of 2023 than they have been for the last 2 or 3 years. So we finally have available product on the shelf across the board, competitive premiums, no delays. That can change pretty fast because the appetite for gold just keeps getting bigger the more our debt goes higher and the more financial problems we have.
We're talking about the pros and cons of owning physical gold. One of those advantages is when it's physical, there's zero counterparty risk. Another way for you to think of that is there isn't any third-party risk. It's really an old-fashioned transaction in a lot of ways, depending on how you store it. There's no login or password for you to take a look at your gold. Dana, when we talk about physical gold, how do we know we're getting the real thing? Really, that leads us into how do we know that we're not getting a counterfeit product? And you are a great person to ask because you conceived of yourself and helped to establish the industry's anti-counterfeiting task force that today works with the Secret Service and Homeland Security to intercept curious merchandise coming into the country. I mean, you really know, but how can we know that we're buying the real thing?
It's a modest but growing problem, and it's a fact, though, that we have Chinese counterfeits coming in from China through various online sales platforms. So you have to be very careful of who you do business with. That's really where the biggest mines can be stepped on. You don't want to do business with pawn shops or online selling platforms because some of the merchandise is spurious. It is bad. So what has happened is over the last 5 or 10 years, the various manufacturing entities, the mints around the world, and the refineries have added anti-counterfeiting design elements into their product to make it harder for the Chinese to counterfeit their product and make it look good. What the Chinese are basically doing is they're taking tungsten and they're plating it with gold because the density is similar. But that weight, for that weight to be right, the size is not quite right. So a dealer like me that looks at thousands and thousands of ounces of gold every month, we can tell immediately, oh, that's bad. It just looks bad. It sounds bad. It doesn't test right on our testing devices. Now, for someone on the street who doesn't know what they're looking at, they won't know the difference. That's why it's imperative that you do business with a reliable, long-standing member of the community. I'm a member of the Professional Numismatists Guild, the P&G, which is the leading organization of rare coin dealers in the country. We have the most wherewithal in the marketplace, the most experience. These are our livelihoods. So it's imperative for us to protect the integrity of the product we handle. Now, I buy directly from the various mints and sell directly to the public. When people who have bought elsewhere want to come sell product to us, I vet it. Everything is tested. I look at it. I make sure it's right, because when something's made by a mint and dies are struck to come together to impress a design on a disc, there are certain characteristics about that are impossible for the Chinese to replicate properly. So it's just knowing who you're doing business with and trusting them is 99% of the battle. That's why I helped to conceive of and establish the Anti-Counterfeiting Task Force in 2016. That's when the problem was presented to us. And we got the U.S. Mint to change the design on their gold and silver eagles in 2021 as a result of that. They've added some design changes that make it harder for the Chinese to replicate of those gold and silver ounces that are being made. So it's mostly do your due diligence, buy from someone who's been in the industry a long time and knows what they're doing. And don't buy just because the deal's pretty good on one of these online platforms, whether it's a private trading platform or some of these auction platforms are not so well vetted these days.
Before you buy a piece of real estate, you can have your third-party inspector do a walkthrough and completely inspect it. And I always recommend doing that. And you have an appraisal as another check on that. But if you're buying gold physically, you might often be buying it online. You're not going to get to touch it or feel it or get a really good close look at it. So there's a great answer. Buy from a reputable platform that has a long track record like Dana's. Once one purchases their physical gold, I think a common question, Dana, is, all right, now what is the best way for me to store these bars of gold? I think some people might think of something they've seen on a movie and have some wall panel that swivels around and opens up some hidden hallway to a back room or something like that. But I don't know if it's always good to store gold in your home. So what are your thoughts with respect to storage?
Well, it depends on how much you have, how comfortable you are with where you have it stored. The rule of thumb is you want to have 24-hour access to your gold, but you also want to be able to sleep at night. And that doesn't always mean that gold is in the same place. So I don't think that storing at home is that bad, as long as it's someplace, a burglar will never find. Like I said, gold is compact and it's easy to put a high amount of value in a small place. You don't want to have it somewhere where you're the only one that knows where it is, just in case something happens to you. You want to have either someone you trust implicitly who knows where it is as well, or you want to have a note in your paperwork. So if something happens to you, there's a treasure map. You can get private insurance for gold storage. with some of these insurance companies that we would recommend who are niche companies, not necessarily State Farm or Allstate. You could store in a safe deposit box, but I don't recommend that at your bank because we have had banking holidays and you don't want to be locked out when you want it.
Counterparty risk is back.
Right. That's exactly true. So if you store it somewhere outside of your control, you do introduce a modest degree of counterparty risk. But we have a couple of private storage facilities that we do recommend that are professional precious metal storage facilities around the country. There's 2 or 3 that we do like where you can store. You're going to pay a storage fee, which is about 0.5% of value on an annual basis because of insurance. They have insurance needs. So their storage fee is basically an insurance fee. You can do that. You can have a safe at home. My last home, that not the one I'm in now, the one that I had before this, when I rehabbed that, I had an in-ground safe put in and a cabinet built above it with a false bottom. The new buyers where I sold the house didn't know it was there. I had to go back and show them where it was. And they were, oh, how nice. Well, it's not something you want to put on a listing agreement. But the point is you can have a safe at home, right? Gun safes are really not the best place because gun safes are actually pretty easy to break into. It won't stop a burglar as much as it might stop, someone who you don't want to get a hold of your gun's child or something, right? There are options, but you have to be a little bit creative and you have to make sure that you can sleep at night knowing that your value is safe.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, the amount of gold that you plan to hold, if you're about to build a new home, maybe that will factor into your plans. Who knows? Well, Dana, just real quickly before we finish, we've been talking about gold, but there are some other popular precious metals, silver, and then what I think of as the 2 most popular platinum group metals, platinum itself and palladium. Any quick thoughts that are important on any of those?
Gold is transferable, pourable wealth. It's easy to carry a lot of gold value in a small space. Silver, it takes about 85 ounces of silver today to equal 1 ounce of gold in dollar value. So it takes up a lot more room. So your storage question is multiplied when you have physical silver. I do think silver is a better financial opportunity than gold because gold is near all-time highs, where silver is less than half of its 2 previous all-time highs. But again, you have to have a place to store it. I do like silver as money to spend in a crisis. So 1 ounce silver coins made by the U.S. Mint or the Canadian Mint. And if you want to have money, hard money, just in case the financial system comes apart at the seams and you want to have some spending money, I do like silver for that. So having, a couple 100 ounces of silver is a good thing for most people. Now, silver is more volatile in price than gold. So if gold oscillates on a small scale up and down, silver oscillates on a wider scale, percentage-wise. It's more volatile, so it oscillates to a wider degree. It tends to lag gold when the price of gold goes higher, but then it tends to play catch-up with a vengeance. So you have to have patience if you're going to invest or save in silver. But I do like it as at these numbers relative to gold as an investment opportunity. Now, platinum and palladium have much higher industrial use, and they're much more limited. Platinum is about twice as scarce as gold in the ground, and palladium is more than twice as scarce as platinum in the ground. And those 2 metals come primarily out of 2 sources, South Africa and Russia. And where gold can move $20 or $40 a day when things are volatile, silver can move 50 cents or $1. Palladium's price can move $100 an ounce in a trading session at times when it's volatile.
Yeah.
So there's some of that too. So timing really matters on platinum and palladium. And if you were to consider one over the other, I would consider palladium. Its track record is much, much better than platinum's, and it's cheap in its price cycle right now.
Yeah, it's wild to me that 10 years ago, an ounce of silver cost more than it does today. So if you inflation adjust for that, silver might only be about 50% of the value that it was 10 years ago. Maybe that's sad, or maybe that's an opportunity. And then, yes, I think so little of the public knows that for quite a few years now, gold has been worth substantially more than platinum. I think a lot of those credit card companies need to change their upper tier credit card from a platinum card to a gold card, because that's the truth that's reflected in the market price of those particular particular metals. Hey, Dana, this has been a great look. We touched on a number of things that we've never talked about on this real estate-centric show when it comes to precious metals. Like I said earlier, so many people put the trust in you and your transparency, in your long track record. So tell our audience how they can find your platform.
We're American Gold Exchange. We're a national physical precious metals, and I'm also a vintage pre-1933 U.S. gold coin expert. So I'm a nerd, a coin nerd in that regard. We're located in Austin, Texas. Our website is www.amergold.com. Our email address is info@amergold.com. We have an 800 number, 800-613-9323, if anyone would like to call. But basically, we're consultative in nature. If you're new to this and don't know how to get started, we can help walk you through some of the issues, pricing, product availability, some of the broker reporting requirements that we're subject to help make sure that you accomplish the goal that you are trying to accomplish. What I've learned over the years working for Jim Blanchard and then having my own business, it's just like any business. If you treat people well, that will come back to you. And we get a lot of repeat and referral business just because we're very competitive, we're very transparent, and we try to help people. It's worked well for us, and we've done it for 25 years now, and hopefully we'll do it for another 25 years.
Well, you called yourself a nerd in this stuff. When I make an investment, preferably, I want to buy through a nerd in that particular niche. So that's actually just perfect. Hey, it's been interesting and really informative, Dana. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me, Keith. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, invest in what's scarce and can't be easily diluted. That's things like real estate and gold. And maybe added on to that, you could even say Bitcoin, ancient coins, fine art, perhaps even vintage sports cards. Limit holding on to what's abundant and can be conjured out of thin air, like dollars and most every world currency. Stock shares can be diluted. But real estate, gold, and Bitcoin, all three of those things take proof of work in order to produce them. And all three take real-world resources to bring them into existence. And tangible real estate and gold, they are two assets that you also have terrific control over. Yeah, why wouldn't banks buy up all of the gold when they could just print more dollars merely by making keystrokes on a keyboard and then changing that in for gold? Why wouldn't they? When it comes to you purchasing physical bullion, whether that's bars or coins, and you're thinking about paying those spot price differentials that Dana and I talked about, think about how that's like you paying closing costs when you get in and out of real estate. It's a lot like that. One thing that's cool about bullion is that almost anyone can participate. I mean, you can buy a 1 ounce silver round for perhaps $30 or $40 and be in the game with a hard, tangible asset. And you know, besides having a great reputation, Dana is a genuine guy. Rather than position gold as some massive wealth creator, yeah, he agreed with what I posited, that in my experience, it is a poor place for creating wealth and an excellent place to store your wealth over the intermediate to long term. And again, if you want to check out his company's website, it is just 8 characters, amergold.com. I'm grateful for the terrific knowledge and experience of Dana Samuelson this week. I will run it back next week. Until then, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.